Okay, I wanted to make a video and talk about the blended classroom model. I'm going to go over a few things, what it is, how I came to teach it, pros and cons, and some tools that are used. This is a definition I found online. You'll find any of the sources I use in the notes for the slides, which I'll be sharing. So this explains basically what a blended classroom is. It is a blend of online and in-class instruction, but the important thing, or one of the important things, is the note that it's integrated learning. So just a teacher that simply uses some online content, that doesn't make it a blended classroom. It has to be one type of experience. You can't have the online component just be individual activities or separate learning. But what really attracted me to this is this last part here, with some elements of student control over time, place, path, and or pace, often referred to as voice and choice. So how do I use this in my class? Well, students are given a list of assignments for each module or unit. A unit is, or a module is a kind of a cohesive amount of content, skills, and knowledge. And so they get all their assignments at once. Now, these assignments can be, reading, hands-on labs, worksheets, what you have it, videos. And these assignments can be completed at any pace, as long as the students are working during class time, in any order, though some orders make more sense than others, any time or place, though my students do almost no work outside of class, which I kind of prefer it that way. I like to be here to help. And individual or group. Now, what I'll say about that is that at OCM, the way our classroom was set up, most students chose to work in some sort of group, either with a partner or with multiple team members. It just made more sense that if you're going to drag out a bunch of equipment, plug it in, be running cables, that it's just easier to have multiple hands helping, to have people keeping track of information you need to write down. Now at TST, the way the classroom is set up, it just doesn't work very well here. So almost all the students here choose to do their work, complete their assignments individually, and we're hoping to change that for the future. So that's what it is. I'm going to try to bring it down to a more detailed, to the classroom level. What does it look like? So let me tell you a little bit about my story. My predecessor at OCM BOCES did a lot of direct instruction. He used the Cisco Net Academy curriculum like I do. This is his activity completion form. So for each chapter, there was a list of all the assignments. And what would happen is that students would come into class, and if he was planning on, say, working on lab 9146, he would pass out those labs. Everybody would gather around the little U-shaped table, and they would work through the lab step by step. He'd usually put the steps up on the projector, go over them. Other days, he might be doing a lecture with PowerPoint, and that's kind of the way it worked. Now, I inherited that, and I changed it a little bit because he had more of a military background. I had more of an educational background. So what I would do is I would give the students, again, I would give them the whole chapter at the time. And as you can see here, they start at the top, they do some questions, then they might do an interactive activity, a video demonstration, some more questions, and a hands-on lab. Now, since I gave it to them all at once, and we have absenteeism issues here at BOCES, and also school districts have different calendars, and students do complete work at differing paces. Almost immediately, these chapters began to be differentiated. Almost immediately, they started to be self-paced, which caused problems when I tried to do direct instruction or whole class instruction. So that led me to try to accommodate what the students were showing me they wanted. This is what my my assignment form looks like now. I now call it a playlist, and we'll get into that. These are all the assignments. Now, even though it's still in a linear layout, which I'm trying to work on that, students can start wherever they want. There's no reason a student couldn't go over here and start working on IPv6. Internet Protocol version 6 is totally different than IPv4. There's no reason they couldn't go here. So they can really go to any section. They can start working on assignments. Some of these assignments are challenge assignments. So students say they're done and they're confident. Well, let's challenge you to go a little extra mile there. I have little checkpoints here to make sure that when a student completes a section, they actually know the content. and obviously a variety of different assignments, which is indicated by all the little icons there. So I'm still not happy with this layout, and I'm working on something a little different, because if you remember, in a blended classroom environment, students should have some say about how they do assignments, when they do assignments. So I'm trying to move to something like this. This is an online service I use called Classcraft. It was originally designed as a classroom management system and basically turns your classroom management into like Dungeons and Dragons, and students have characters, and I could talk about that for hours, but we won't. They added a feature called Quests, which allows you to lay out your assignments as quests would be laid out in a role-playing game. So this down here in the bottom left here is what the students see. They have an introduction, and then they see their first quest. Now, when they complete that quest, they will unlock the other paths, and they'll kind of show up over here in the fog of war area. And as you can see, if you look at the big map that's completely revealed here, you'll see that once you get to this assignment, you finish your Cornell notes over that section, you could go do this packet tracer lab, you could do this interactive activity, you could go here and such and such. Okay, so you get a little idea of how I kind of fell into the blended classroom approach. And obviously a big tool that I use is the playlist or the assignment form. Now, I didn't know they were called playlists. They were just assignment forms, and I was adjusting them in ways that I thought was helpful to the students. I learned when I went to a conference that these things are called playlists, and there's a lot of information about how other teachers have used them. So I'm going to try to share some of that with you now. This is something I found online. Sources are in the notes to the slides. I cannot improve upon this definition, so I'm just going to give you some seconds to read it. Feel free to pause the video if you want to read it through, but this is pretty great. Okay, so that's what playlists do. That's why we'd want to use them. So let me bring it down to a little bit of my personal experience. So when I first started, when I interviewed for the job at BOCES, one of the things I was asked a lot about is how are you going to deal with 2.5 hours of class time? I've been on interview committees, and we ask everyone about this. It's very challenging, especially for new teachers, especially in CTE when we have people coming from industry. It's a lot of time. And the approach of giving the students a list of all the assignments at once and letting them work on it at various paces actually helps with the situation. Another issue that I came into was the staggered arrival. How do you start that direct instruction? How do you start the full class activity when you're waiting for students to show up? That is a challenge even for teachers who've been teaching in BOCES for many, many years. And the blended classroom model has a very easy answer to this. They all have their work. There's no reason, whether there's a sub, whether the teacher's there, while the students can't get into it and start finding work to do. We, of course, like everybody else, a wide range of student abilities. Absenteeism, and I mentioned before the school calendars. Different students will have excused absences at different times. You can't just mark it down with the 0. We need to have a way to accommodate that. So here's an interesting one. Back when we taught PC repair and networking, we would have students that came into the first year of PC repair who had already built computers and could identify all the components. And then we have students who come in who do not have a computer, don't have internet access. That's a challenge. How do you address that? Well, with the blended classroom model, those students who have that knowledge, instead of sitting quietly and waiting for their chance to learn, they can jump in and fly ahead, and we can work with the students who are starting from a different place. Students who are incapable of learning 65% of knowledge and skills. I use 65, of course, because 65 is a passing. What would happen here is that we'd get students from the regional school, regional alternative school, or from special ed sometimes, who would have extensive IEPs or issues where they would just not be able to achieve certain knowledge or skills. Now, in the past, those students were discouraged from being in the program or whatever. I don't think that's ethical. A teacher should not be engaged in that sort of activity. However it's decided students should be in the program, once they're in there, you just have to teach them. That's just the way it works. So how do we provide a path for these students so that they can be making productive use of their time? Again, blended classroom has some possibilities there. Career goals, change, mismatch, none. So some students are sent to BOCES simply because otherwise they wouldn't graduate. They're not interested in a career. Some students are interested in the career and change their minds. And sometimes their parents decided that this was their career, even though they're interested in auto technology or nursing or something. And that gets to the last one of inability to leave the program, is that once students are not fit for the program and decide they would like to go someplace else, sometimes they're prevented by guidance counselors who say that if they leave, they won't graduate, or they're prevented by parents who are very excited about the technology career, again, sometimes when the student isn't. So all these challenges that come with teaching at BOCES and at Career Technology are really greatly helped by having a blended approach where students can work at their own pace and choose the kind of work they want to do. Again, student voice within reason. So another way I want to talk about the blended approaches is I created this kind of thirds model. This is a gross exaggeration, and these numbers are completely made up, but it's really meant to just illustrate an idea. So in direct instruction, or a very traditional classroom, and sometimes in some of our activity-based, project-based classrooms, let's say we have a teacher in the front here who's going to deliver instruction. Might be a PowerPoint with lecture like I'm doing now. It might be an activity. Then we have the class, and I divided them into thirds. A third of the students would be successful without the instruction. I hope they're going to politely sit there and wait. We have a third of the students who need this instruction. So that's good. And the teacher's doing the right thing then. And then we have a third of the students that either will not listen, or not going to pay any attention to the instruction, or that instruction is not going to fit them. It's not going to help them. It may not be anything they choose to do. It's just not going to be helpful. So in a traditional, conventional approach, the teacher delivers some sort of instruction, and maybe they're a really great 21st century teacher, so they do some song and dance and interactive, kinesthetic, whatever, and maybe pulls in some of this group here, pulls them in, and we pat ourselves on the back and we say, wow, we reached most of them. We even today reached that really hard to get to group. But no, we didn't. The green group here, they didn't need us in the first place. The yellow group needed us. And then a lot of these kids, they didn't need us, and we really needed to wrap this up so we could go help them one-on-one, which is what they really needed. So that's kind of problematic. And a lot of our 21st century teaching, hands-on, things like that, are to address this disparity. But a lot of times we avoid this green group, where they're kind of invisible to us. We just get to check them off, even though we didn't really do anything for them. Okay, so if that is what the, say a traditional or conventional old-style classroom looks like, what does a blended classroom model look like? Something like that. So the biggest difference goes back to really something the constructivists in the 1950s figured out, is that, if you get in front of a class and you start giving them a bunch of information, even if it's very useful, like our orange group here really needs that information and it will help them. If you don't have a need for it yet, there's no point. So the constructivists really wanted teachers to create a need to know. So how do you create a need to know this information? Well, in their normal lives, they don't really need to know about networking or programming or computers. But in the classroom, because they have a whole giant list of all these assignments and activities, very daunting, that they need to get accomplished, they have a need to know. So what I do is, with the playlist, I give the students the task first. I give them the assignment, the activity first. I give them a buffet of tasks and activities. And I surround them with resources and tools. If you come into my classroom, you'll see equipment everywhere. It's not just there because I'm lazy and disorganized. It's there because of the fact that I want physically and digitally all the tools to be at the students' fingertips, to be completely surrounded by all the resources they might need. Our green group here, hey, they know what to do and they're going to figure it out. Our yellow group here, we're taking away that direct instruction. We're taking away that kind of show them how to do everything before they even attempt it. So they're going to need to have those tools ready. And of course, we have our red group here that, as you see with all the little Mr. Easton heads there, they're going to get Mr. Easton's one-on-one help, and he's going to be all over there helping to direct them to those tools and showing them how to do that. And so the third item here, personalized assistance. What we have going on in the classroom, looking at the diagram here, is that I'm spending a lot of time with the students who weren't benefited by that direct instruction, spending a lot of time helping get them started, keeping them focused, and making sure they know how to use and get scaffold the help to use those tools that are in the room. Now this group here, they're kind of being disadvantaged in a way, but advantaged in another way. Disadvantaged because they found that instruction very useful. However, they're going to need to learn how to help themselves. And that's going to be a challenge for them, but also a benefit. And again, surrounding them with all those tools. Now this green group is all over the place. It's just sitting here being bored in that slide. But now the green group is all over the place. What are they doing? Well, some of them are cutting ahead. They're going to the bleeding edge, but they're not going to be in chapter 13 if somebody else is in chapter 2. So there's a limit to that. So what else are they going to be doing? They're going to be helping people. They're going to be feeling very successful and accomplished when they have already completed assignments. They can go back and help people with technical issues and help them reset equipment and all sorts of things. And so they are an excellent resource. So even though we've kind of reduced this resource, which was beneficial to one slice of our population, we're actually adding this whole new resource, peer help. In my classroom, one of the biggest advantages of the blended classroom model is that there are always people, probably numerous people, who have already done the assignment. So they can help you with the tricky parts, the parts that are tricky for you, and also some of the technical issues that come up. I mean, as you can see here, Mr. Easton needs to be all over the place, but there's only one of them. So the students are a big part of providing that help. Another thing about this approach is that in this model, there's a penalty for being smart, for being capable, for being independent. And there's a penalty for needing extra help. And as teachers, let's be honest, we find a lot of tools to overcome that, but that is the default. In this approach, there's no penalty for working ahead. There's no penalty for stopping your work and helping others. There's no penalty for needing help or not needing help. So I'm really a big fan of this. As you can see, I go on and on about it. So I wanted to just address the one group. I had a student that on their resume said, you know, when they're listing the positive qualities about themselves, that they need to be they prefer to be shown everything, and they learn best when someone demonstrates everything that they will need to do. It's great that they know that about themselves. It's nothing to be ashamed of, knowing that's the kind of person you are. But we all know that that's not something you'd put on a resume, because in the workplace, that's not an advantage. As a career technical education program, I'm required to have an advisory committee of people who work in the industry. And I got those people together, and 1 year, a big concern passed on to me from my predecessor, who was working at a different BOCES, was that our Cisco curriculum had just changed, and they were using Windows 8, but Windows 10 was out, and so should we stick with Windows 7? So, you know, I dutifully brought this to my advisory committee, and they did not care. And what they basically said to me is, when we hire someone, we want someone who's going to go out and do a job. Whether they have to figure it out, whether they have to troubleshoot, whatever, we need those kind of people. Windows 10, Windows 8, Linux, we don't care. We need that kind of problem solver. We do not want someone who's going to pick up the phone 5 minutes later and say, hey, I need help. What do I do? I've never done this kind of thing before. If we were going to have that kind of person, we would just do it ourselves. And so that was kind of an aha moment for me. That was an awakening where I really started to realize that even though maybe in this scenario, not everyone's going to be achieving the same thing from the program. Maybe not everyone's even going to achieve what I think they should. But everyone is going to start to achieve some sort of independence. And that's maybe more important than the technical information that's going to be outdated by the time they get to college. Okay, so bringing it all back together, what is a blended classroom? It's any formal education program in which a student learns at least in part through online learning, with some elements of student control, student voice and choice, over time, place, path, and/or pace. So I've talked a lot about all the advantages. Let me focus on the disadvantages. A lot of times in education, somebody comes up with a new idea or an old idea revisited, and it's win, win, win. Everyone should do this. Everything will be better, and it's never better, because everything has pros and cons. So let's address some of the issues right now. Social animals. I saw a study that said that the highest correlation in student achievement in Head Start programs was not the financial or socioeconomic status of the parents. It was actually the achievement of the students in the room. The students were highest correlation with the other students. Humans are social. Just like I said, the one student's not going to be in chapter 13 if someone else is in chapter 3. It's going to be hard to get students to give you 2 hours of work when some are only giving you 10 minutes. So humans, we look around our workplace at the other people and we judge ourselves by that. And sometimes if people are doing very little, which can happen in the blended classroom model, there is that responsibility. There is that opportunity to make excuses and not get stuff done. So that's a challenge. It does not level playing fields. I think it appropriately doesn't level playing fields, but it does not level them. It blows them up. Students who are ahead will get very far ahead, and students who struggle will be given the opportunity to work at a pace so that they learn the content that they have progressed through, but they're not going to get as far. And that is definitely something you need to know going in. This is not going to be a silver bullet that's going to make everybody at the same level. And it shouldn't. If a student comes in severely disadvantaged, or a student comes in knowing 80% of the content, if a student walked into calculus and they know 80% of the calculus content, they should not spend a year getting that 20% done. Grading is a nightmare. I won't even talk about this. Let's just say that grading people who, if there's 20 students in the class, 20 different spots, 20 different sets of assignments, 20 different activities being worked on. It's a nightmare, and I use every digital tool, everything in my possession to address it. And I'm not where I want to be. I've made progress. And then someone dropped a giant lead balloon on me called classmate, and so that has really hurt. Kids who are not expected to work independently. This is a very weird thing. Hopefully it's just society today, and we'll move on. Originally, my predecessor and some teachers say that in order to be in a computer technology class, you need to have a certain level of math, you need to have a certain level of reading. I have had students who read on a third grade level. I've had students who struggle with remedial math classes. With my class, I can accommodate a lot of different levels, but what is changed, what is more difficult, is students are required to work more independently and to take more responsibility for their education. A positive, right? There's also a negative. There are literally IEPs that are written that say student cannot handle independent work. Student must be refocused every 10 minutes. Teacher must check in with the student, So there are students who have documented accommodations which basically say that they can't do this. They can't handle this level of work. And I definitely see students who might be more successful in traditional classrooms struggle with that responsibility and struggle for 2 solid years without finding a way out. Teachers are responsible for everything. That's another trend nowadays. Teachers are responsible for everything. So it's a challenge and definitely a cause of some anxiety for teachers when you are being held accountable for their test scores and the work they complete. However, you're trying to approach a model where you're putting the responsibility back on them. A lot of times you can feel very good about their successes, but when they don't take over that responsibility, when they drop the ball, you also can feel that it's your fault. And so I have had situations where students have said, well, Mr. Easton doesn't really teach. We have to teach ourselves. Sometimes I feel very proud of that, and sometimes it causes a lot of anxiety. I remember telling our principal that he's like, so what do you plan to teach today? It's like, I don't teach anymore. They're going to be doing stuff, and I'm going to be helping them. I probably should have explained it a little better than that. Can get there other ways, and that's going back to this is the blended classroom approach is what I feel is so perfect for who I am, what I teach, and the career that we're preparing students for. It's not going to be right for everyone. And it really depends on a lot more pluses than minuses. And you got to go into it knowing the minuses. And really, you got to have administrative support, because some administrators, if they don't see you doing things that look like teaching, talking, bossing, making students do an activity with bouncy balls or something, they're not going to think you're a teacher. So sometimes you got to show them what they think teaching is. And this is a little different. So I hope this video has been helpful. I hope I haven't talked too much. I'm sure I have, but believe me, it could have been worse. And that is also one of the reasons why I choose the blended classroom model. I have to work against my weaknesses. And one of my weaknesses is being excited about the content, talking too much, and putting myself, let's go back and look at that, putting myself way too big a part of the learning experience. I need to be little helps here and there. And that's what I try to do with blended classroom.